A Life in 30 Languages, written by Tim Keeley, narrated by David Marcus. Chapter 1. From Florida to Colombia. My interest in foreign languages started at a very young age. I have memories of listening to foreign languages on a shortwave radio from around the age of 6. I just loved the sound of the different languages. It was like music to my ears. At the same time, I was dying to understand what was being said. Did they perhaps know something the listeners didn't? I experienced a growing desire to learn several foreign languages and discover the secrets they veiled. I would furthermore spend hours looking at pictures of faraway places in National Geographic magazines, and even read some of the articles since I had already learned to read quite well. I was extremely fascinated by the various cultures I saw in the magazines. At the same time, I wondered how long these cultures would maintain their uniqueness. For example, an article in 1967 about Yap was entitled Micronesia, the Americanization of Eden, and that title had me worried. I wanted to fully experience these cultures before their traditions and customs were affected by so-called modernity or by Christian missionaries commanding them to wear more clothes and to reject the essence of their worldview. I finally had the privilege to visit Yap in 2006. I spent the first 10 years of my life in Central Florida as the youngest child of a typical monolingual suburban family. We then moved to South Florida, which was far more cosmopolitan. Hispanics, mainly from Cuba, represented about 30% of the population and spoke Spanish as their first language. So, naturally, the first additional language I learned was Spanish. In primary school, each week, we watched an hour of Spanish lessons broadcast on TV. The bilingual kids in class would crack jokes in Spanish, and I laughed with them, even if I didn't fully understand what was so funny. I seriously started studying Spanish in middle school at age 12. Sometimes when walking between classes, I would repeat phrases from a dialogue I had learned from my textbook. Passing the library, I would say, "Vamos a la biblioteca para estudiar." Let's go to the library to study. While my 3 elder siblings didn't share the same passion for foreign languages, my eldest sister Susie loved to travel abroad. When she was in high school, she joined a musical entertainment touring group called Up With People and toured the world. I was captivated by her stories from Africa and Europe. Sometimes she brought international cast members home. Although I was only 10 years old at the time, I especially remember Provi, a cheerful petite girl from Puerto Rico. I loved listening to Provi's accent in English. The effect of another language on her English reflected experiences from a different culture, luring me to discover the world. We were still living in a relatively culturally and linguistically homogeneous Central Florida town at that time, and I craved hearing different languages and accents in person. I used to walk through the woods not far from our house to the home of a Swedish family that had recently immigrated to the U.S. The mom would invite me in for milk and cookies and tell me stories in an enchanting intonation about her motherland. She would speak Swedish with her children, and I was thrilled when I understood what she said from the context. In the first grade of primary school, we read Fun with Dick and Jane, with all its cultural homogeneity representative of white America. I was bored out of my mind, often getting into trouble for making noise or sleeping during the reading lessons. When the teacher yelled at me to wake up, I just mumbled a response. She was convinced I had a speech impediment and signed me up for weekly speech therapy. I remember having to leave the classroom to go to the therapy sessions with all the other students looking at me as if something was wrong with me. The therapist sat in front of me and showed me pictures. Apple, apple. Now say apple. That's right, open your mouth wide. Apple, apple. I truly don't know if I had problems with mumbling and lack of enunciation before those sessions. My memories tell me that I sounded like everyone else when playing with other kids during recess. But I do know that even to this day, speaking English clearly without slurring and stumbling over words when I am nervous, overly excited, or self-conscious is a challenge for me. Fortunately, I have mainly been lecturing in Japanese and other languages besides English during my academic career. These speech problems cannot be neurological because they only transpire in English. I can roll my R's in Spanish and accurately produce Thai, Vietnamese, Tibetan, and Nepali consonant and vowel sounds that have no equivalents in English. I have no problems with notorious Polish consonant clusters, and recently I've gotten pretty good with clicks in Zulu. So the cause must be the psychological shock of having had to attend speech therapy. My grades in primary and middle school were average at best. For some mysterious reason, I still have a report card from my fourth grade teacher, Miss Brinkley. In the comments section opposite the table, evidencing several C's and some D's, she wrote, "Tim should control his talking and laughing. He is not putting forth the effort in his schoolwork that he is capable of displaying." In middle school, the only subjects in which I attained top scores were Spanish and English. My parents had the results of my IQ and aptitude tests and would often say, "We know you are not trying." When I entered high school at age 14, I figured out that I should pay attention in class if I wanted to get into a good university. It paid off. Spanish was the only subject I studied considerably outside of class. I even joined the Spanish club. And soon I was in all the advanced classes and had the highest GPA possible. Pompano High School experimented with some new ideas in education, giving the students the right to choose their classes and determine their own schedules. A minimum number of credits and subjects were required for graduation, and we could take as many classes as time permitted. Attendance was not mandatory. In the middle of my junior year at age 16, I had taken all the advanced courses. Subsequently, I received permission to enter Broward Community College. In addition, by the age of 18, I had studied for and passed 33 of the college-level examination program CLEP exams, earning credits for courses typically taught during the first 2 years of college. In the fall of 1974, I transferred to the University of Florida. By the end of the spring quarter the following year, I was close to having enough credits to graduate before my 19th birthday in August. Instead of pursuing that goal, I decided to study in Colombia, where I spent 1 year at Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá. There were two main reasons for this decision. First, when I was 15 years old, I lied about my age, easy to do since I was 190 centimeters tall, and started working at hotels and restaurants after school and on weekends. Many of the retirees I met there confided in me that they wished they had been more adventurous and traveled the world when they were young. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. The other reason is that I decided not to go to medical school. I talk about that in Chapter 22. Colombians have one of the clearest and easiest Spanish accents to understand among the great variety of accents and dialects in the Americas. There is no such thing as a standard Colombian Spanish, since Colombia has many regional variations, and some are more difficult to understand than others. However, when people talk about Colombian Spanish, they refer to the country's central area, where Bogotá, the capital, is located. In this region, people speak slowly and often pause between phrases. In addition, all vowels and consonants are clearly and distinctly pronounced. These characteristics are the exact opposite of the Cuban Spanish I was used to. Besides taking Latin American literature and political science courses at Universidad de los Andes, I studied Portuguese, French, and German at language centers in Bogotá. Learning a foreign language through the medium of a second foreign language can be very beneficial. Listening to the teachers explain the grammar and idiomatic phrases helped me to think more in Spanish. Training yourself to think in a foreign language is an exercise in mind discipline, much like meditation. Mastering this ability in your first foreign language greatly facilitates doing so in additional languages. At that point in my life, I set the goal to learn all the major languages of the world, which I defined as languages spoken by more than 50 million speakers. 46 years have passed since setting that challenging goal. I am now not too far away from achieving that goal, and I have also learned minor languages in the process. During my stay in Colombia, I put in an all-out effort to acquire a native-like accent. This was the point in time of my most significant transformation in the sense of creating new linguistic and cultural identities. When we learn a new language well among native speakers, we create a new linguistic and cultural identity, imitating, to the best of my ability, how the people around me spoke Spanish significantly affected my accent in English. When I visited my family in Florida, they remarked that I had a Latin American accent when I spoke English. It took a while to control the effect of my new linguistic and cultural identities on my native tongue. I've found it fascinating that the new identities I have acquired over the years do not tend to affect one another. They only affect my native tongue when I am not vigilant or not focused on preventing it.